Hey everyone, Nate Birt, CEO at Silver Maple Strategies. Thanks so much for taking time out of your day to join me for this session. I'm recording this on Thursday, July 3rd. So for those in the United States preparing for the holiday weekend, many of you are out of the office. And so I want to make sure you have this information for use whenever you have time to dig into this kind of professional development material. But today's topic is going to be around this idea of 3 nonprofit operations bottlenecks that are costing you growth and how to fix them. So I don't propose to have all of the answers, but what I'm going to share with you today is based on experience working with many nonprofits. Of course, my background is in food, ag, and conservation. We also at Silver Maple Strategy serve a variety of nonprofits that work in other categories, other industries, other focus areas. And so I think these insights are widely applicable. And so whether it is reinforcing something you're already working through or maybe addresses a barrier that you're facing, I hope something in here can be helpful to you today. So as we get started, let me just give you a sense of where we are headed today. So I'm going to start off by giving you a preview of some free resources that I will include with today's session. Secondly, I've got a few housekeeping items. I'll give you a quick sense of who I am and who we help at Silver Maple Strategies. Give you a sense of the operations challenges that we see many nonprofits facing today. I'll walk you through our resilience leadership model, which is our proprietary framework here at Silver Maple Strategies for how we help nonprofit leaders and their teams navigate uncertainty and develop clearer messaging, internal dialogue, operating systems, etc. And then I'll give you those breakthrough strategies. I'll give you a little bit of homework to take away from today's session, and then I'll share a quick feedback survey. Obviously happy to answer any questions either on this call, or if you're watching the recording, then feel free to shoot me an email anytime, and happy to set up time to talk. And of course, you'll also get those free resources. If you stick around, scan the QR code to the survey at the end, you'll get that resource, or you can just email me directly if that's preferred. All right. So as a result of you joining today, either in person or virtually, I want to give you a couple of free resources. The first is a cheat sheet. Again, it's going to take all of the information I'm going to share today and sort of break that out in a very nice executive summary style, and just give you something to work with as you're sort of navigating, okay, which of these operating bottlenecks are we experiencing right now in our nonprofit? I know leadership goes through seasons. And so what is challenging today may not be what you're struggling with, 90 days from now. So hopefully this can be an evergreen resource, and definitely want to give that to you. And then secondly, if you want to discuss your specific situation further, either right off the bat, hey, there's something I want to discuss with Nate, or there is something that comes up in today's session that you want to dive deeper on, shoot me a note, go to my website and check out the contact page. I think on the website there's a book a meeting link at the top of the page. And you can reach out to me and we'll set something up and talk at no cost to you. And hopefully I can give you something that can be helpful to you as you're navigating what comes next. All right. So a few things as we're diving in. I always like to remind people, look, this is about you. This is about focus over notes, right? So I'm happy to share a copy of these slides. Obviously you have this recording if you're watching the video replay. Silent cell phones and desktop alerts where applicable. Participate and ask questions. And suspend disbelief, right? So what I want to say is that it can be very easy to hear a presentation like what I'm going to give today and say, look, Nate, this isn't for me. This sounds great in theory, but in practice, it's much more messy. It's more complex. That may be true, right? And so what I want to say is just give it some time to sort of percolate in your mind, right? It may not hit you today, but maybe 2 days from now or a week or a month from now, you'll say, oh, I remember sitting in this session thinking that sounded completely ludicrous, but now, given where I'm at, this is making more sense. Or, oh, I see this might be able to help me navigate this uncertainty. So keep that in mind. Be open to considering things that may sound crazy or far-fetched. And then I always like to give a hat tip to Dan Sullivan, the tremendous business coach and author who came up with this principle, the gap versus the gain, right? Gain-minded thinking is I only compare myself not to other nonprofits, not to other leaders and all the progress they're making and the great impact they're having, but I compare myself to my former self, right? I compare our current nonprofit to where we were 6 months ago or 5 years ago. that gives you a sense of momentum, a sense of progress, a sense of opportunity. Whereas gap-minded thinking is like, I'm never going to get ahead. We're always going to be struggling relative to other nonprofits, relative to others in the fill-in-the-blank industry. And so I don't want you to emphasize that. I want you to think about the gain and sort of living in the gain as we're going through this time together today. All right. So briefly, who am I? I've been a communicator professionally for more than 17 years, working closely with nonprofits, both in the corporate world and now in my own consulting practice and marketing agency for several years now, sort of a combined about almost a decade. Author of a guidebook for social impact leaders, nonprofit leaders, podcast host of the Secrets of Social Impact Communicators podcast, also a husband, dad of 4, and aspiring farmer. So my family and I personally are invested in the success of nonprofits because we care personally about issues including adoption, families, hunger. Those are the kinds of things that we personally have prioritized in our charitable giving. And, look, I grew up, walking dogs at the humane shelter and all those kinds of things. So I am very well aware of what, leaders in nonprofits, academia, agencies are doing for the greater good. And I want to be a part of that. That's what we want to do here at Silver Maple Strategies. This is just a very short list of folks we've helped over the years. We really believe that the proof is in the pudding, right? We want our clients to be more successful, to build that resilience that I'm going to talk to you a little bit about in a moment. And it's been an honor to really work with a variety of organizations that really exemplify nonprofits and academic institutions that are really leading from a place of curiosity, from a place of opportunity, and so that's been fantastic. So my goal personally, I'm recording this in early July 2025. I'd love to help 50 nonprofit executives and their teams this year. That's sort of what I'm after. I'm sure you have your own goals as well, and so keep those in mind as well going through today's session, right? How are you going to show up in such a way to apply what you're learning so that you get closer to those goals? All right, let's dig into the material. And I want to start with sort of these 3 operating challenges. Now, I've given you these broad categories: mindset, people and machines, and money. And, for most people, the money would come first, right? Without the money, nothing else follows, right? You can't do programming. It's hard to have the right mindset when money's not coming in the door. I'm actually going to encourage you to flip the script, right? You need to have the right mindset, which takes time and patience and practice. And look, this isn't the first mindset conversation you're going to have, right? I'm sure you've heard this plenty of times before. But what I see a lot, and it's understandable because of the place where many nonprofit leaders sit, is they're centered on doubt, right? There's a denial of self, right? I'm going to set aside my own career, my own personal needs, my health, whatever, for the good of the organization, for the good of the clients we serve. And that's very honorable. The challenge becomes when your health starts to deteriorate or when your personal life starts to erode those boundaries. And so what I really want to help you do is avoid unintended sabotage by getting those mindsets right and putting some best practices in place to cultivate a healthy mindset over the long haul, right? And that's going to help your operations and your impact more than anything else on this slide. The second piece I think you really have to get in place is people and machines, right? So increasingly, artificial intelligence, other technologies are making it more fun, depending on who you are, excuse me, easier, perhaps, more innovative, more creative, but that has to complement the core of your organization, which is human-centered leadership, right? Whether it's just you, whether it's half-time you and half-time someone else, or a staff of a dozen, or whatever the case might be, right? And so, I think increasingly there are opportunities to move from analog to digital to the degree that it makes sense. There's no question AI brings loads of trade-offs, many challenging aspects, from effects on a variety of people groups to environmental challenges. And so I'm not suggesting at all that AI is like pure as the driven snow, that we need to all just jump on the bandwagon, no questions asked. But what I am saying is that my hope is that those tools can actually be used for good, for maybe solving some of those challenges, and for helping your organization get clarity, do more with less, be wise stewards of your resources, etc. So automation, uncertainty, and then inconsistent cross-training. I think there's this focus on sort of all systems are go, nose to the grindstone, get it done, when nonprofits are sort of trying to build that financial runway, trying to get programmatic stability. And in a very rapidly changing landscape, whether political, economic, or otherwise, focusing on training, sort of stepping back and sort of figuring out what different members of your team need, what your partners might need. You're doing all of those things in bits and pieces, but it's often hard to really focus dedicated any measurable amount of time to those things. So I want to think a little bit about how to maybe tackle that today. And then finally, money, right? Money is I'm sure what's top of mind for many of you, right? And so the challenges that I often see with money, and we see here at Silver Maple Strategies, diffuse attention, right? You're trying to juggle multiple balls. You're thinking about multiple funding avenues, whether it's government or private foundation or corporation. You're doing a lot of different research and trying to figure out how to make sense of it all, how to get an action plan put together around that research. And it can create tricky predicaments, right? If you only have 6 months or 3 months of runway left, you got to kind of run around like your hair is on fire to figure something out, right? And so it is very understandable that people face these challenges. And what I'm hoping to do today is give you some ideas or some frameworks that you can use to work through each of these bottlenecks. And I was thinking about doing something silly with the 4th of July around, bottleneck, bottle rocket breakthroughs or something. But, so be safe if this is the 4th and you're, watching this and getting ready to shoot off fireworks. But hopefully we can create some fireworks in your nonprofit by taking some of these insights to heart today. All right. I believe there's a better way. I've seen other nonprofits succeed by sort of rethinking the status quo on those 3 bottlenecks. And so let me give you a sense of how that's possible. I'm going to take a drink real quick. Okay. So 3 operational bottlenecks, breakthrough strategies. And if you're just joining us, welcome. I'm really glad that you're here. And obviously, if you have questions, don't hesitate to drop those into the chat. And we'll have dedicated time at the end for Q&A as well. So I mentioned those mindset barriers. And what I'm going to recommend to you is instead of some of those more limiting beliefs or challenging thought processes that often crop up for very reasonable reasons for nonprofit leaders, focus on restoring confidence, affirming your value. I'll explain how to do this in a moment. And tell yourself new stories, right? Number 2, as it relates to people, your human capital, and any machines or technology you're using, I'm going to encourage you to leverage AI to the degree that it makes sense for you, ethically, morally, within the structure of your unique situation. Find ways to increasingly offload administrative burden, or find ways to delegate that's going to free you up to do your most creative and best work. And flex around the unknowns, right? Basically anticipate things are going to be rocky from here on out in perpetuity, right? This is just the nature of working in a nonprofit. And then 3, on the money side, we're going to help you focus your fundraising. We're going to bias you toward action versus research, right? You've got to balance the 2, but I think a bias toward action is going to get you further faster. And it's surprising how little research, how you can do deep research in a very concentrated, time-sensitive way to really get you further faster. And then extend that financial runway, because once you have more runway, you can breathe a little easier, your heart's racing less, and you're able to focus on what comes next. All right. So with that being said, are you ready to break through some of these, operations bottlenecks so your nonprofit can breathe, lead, and grow? If you are ready to go, type yes in the chat. I'll be watching, and I will know that it's time to move on and dive into the material. All right, I'm monitoring the chat, and I know that if you're still here with us, you are ready to dive in. So thank you for being here, and let's go ahead and get started. Let's talk first about mindset. So I mentioned earlier that some of the challenges or issues that I often see nonprofit leaders facing are issues related to doubts, right? I'm unsure about where we're headed next. I don't know what the financial landscape has in store for us. I'm not sure if I agree with, I'm not sure how much value we're giving. If the money isn't coming in the door, what does that say about our impact or our ability to be successful? And so I think you can flip the script and really focus on these 3 areas within mindset, right? Confidence, affirming your value, and new stories. So 3 steps you can take to move in this direction of the opportunity. First and foremost, as you're breaking through these mindset bottlenecks, I called it habeas corpus for good, right? In a court of law or in the legal system, habeas corpus is basically the notion that if someone's going to accuse you of a crime or you're doing something wrong, you have to be able to produce the evidence, right? And so I think too oftentimes the stories that nonprofit leaders tell themselves are unhelpful because of, anecdotes or something that went wrong on one specific day out of the entire calendar year. And that becomes a proxy for interpreting everything else that's going on in your nonprofit, right or wrong, right? And so what I call this is habeas corpus for good, right? So I would recommend opening a Google Doc or a Microsoft Word file, whatever you use to keep track of records, and keep documentation of things that are going right, right? So the purpose of this resource is to be a reflection to you of everything that's going well that you often might overlook, right? So for example, say you get an email from a client that you're serving who's just blown away by the service they're getting or by the impact that your program is having. Copy that, paste it into your swipe file. Let's say that you've had a conversation with a funder. You got some notes from maybe either you use an AI tool for recording notes from your meetings or you write them down. Maybe a funder was like really impressed by your latest annual report or your quarterly briefing, or they've offered you the chance to apply for an extended round of funding, whatever the case might be. Write those things down, right? Capture that. If you see a team member or a partner that you work with outside of your nonprofit doing something really admirable, if you've produced a resource, or whether it's a white paper, a research report, handouts, videos, theory of change and logic model that you're updating or revising, a new website, whatever the case might be, document those things, include links, include screen grabs, just to give yourself and share that, again, as much as you're comfortable doing with those you work with, just to reinforce, like, hey, when I'm having a bad day, make it a habit. I'm going to look at this swipe file. I'm going to remind myself we are doing good things, like we are making progress. I think that's really important. The second piece of mindset really boils down to pivoting from, this applies to anything in your organization, financially, but also operationally, and that is pivoting your mindset from expense to investment. Sometimes when nonprofit leaders talk to me about preparing a budget for a grant proposal, for example, what I hear them say is, well, this is our blended rate, and so we're going to ask for this much to cover our salaries. We're going to ask for this much to cover, the cost of doing business within our nonprofit, so printing and whether it's food or operating equipment or whatever the case might be, right, depending on the funding and what the organization is trying to accomplish. I think that's all technically accurate, but the problem that I see too often is that when we just talk in sort of raw materials terms or these extractive terms like, cost, expense, labor, supplies, we get into this idea that sort of we as humans are operating as machines. And I think it's really important, especially as AI ramps up, that we demarcate what is truly authentically human. Now, humans do not live or breathe or operate as machines, and so we shouldn't talk about them that way. And so, again, I think it's really important to be able to say, look, we are an investment, right? If, let's say, I'm an executive director and I have a part-time colleague who's working on marketing and communications or working on business development. And so I think in conversation, both externally, but especially internally as well, look, we're going to ask for an investment of $50,000 because we have inherent expertise. Our time is worth something. We've developed this unique framework for implementing this program. We have these demonstrated outcomes, both historical and also the outcomes that we're striving for. And so again, think about what you're asking for, the way you talk about what you do, and indeed you yourself and your colleagues as an investment, right? You're not an expense, you're not a cost, you're not a cog in a machine, you are an investment. You have inherent worth. So definitely keep that top of mind day to day, because again, it's so easy to get bogged down in, these are the deliverables we're providing, these are the services, these are the funders, this is the stuff that we're doing. But again, the outcomes, what you're creating is not a deliverable, it's not a service, it's not a widget of your time, right? It's something much greater than that. And then finally, I would encourage you to think about fundraising in particular, but just operating your nonprofit in general as you move through this, into this breakthrough opportunity to get out of these bottlenecks of mindset, to negotiate from strength. And what I mean by that is it's important to not undersell, under business develop the work that you do, right? So oftentimes, let's say there's a new request for funding, request for proposals that's issued by a private foundation or a corporation, and a nonprofit leader looks at that and says, well, the cap on this award is, let's say, $10,000. Or maybe there's no cap and it's kind of unclear, and so we're just going to sort of be, shooting for a decent number. What I often see, and again, this is true in the for-profit world as well when it comes to sales, is, well, if they say the cap is 10, I'm going to ask for 5 because the odds of me getting funding are better if I just ask for less, right? If I ask for less, they'll be able to get out more awards, and they'll be able to maybe increase our odds that our nonprofit will get an award. That's one approach, and I think there's logic to it, right? I wouldn't necessarily encourage you to always ask for something less than the cap, or again, I think you have to be strategic, right? But what I think is a truism that maybe doesn't always come across immediately is that funders want to understand the value because they have goals and objectives they're trying to fulfill in the world, right? Maybe a private family foundation really cares about environmental issues because the people who left that money before they passed away really cared about water quality, clean air, wildlife habitat. That family is stewarding those resources so that those outcomes are achieved, whether nationally, in their county, or in their state. And so, if you are going to help them achieve that value, they want to invest in organizations and nonprofits they know can help them do the work and deliver those kinds of outcomes. And so by reducing the amount you're asking for, especially when it's well beneath the cap that's been set, if there is a cap, the concern I have is that a lot of times I worry that funders can devalue what they see in you and your work, because they're saying, well, they're promising us they're going to do all of these things, but for this much money, like there's something that doesn't add up here, right? There's a question that maybe comes up in the funder's mind that you don't want to put there, right? So don't doubt your value. Be accurate, be truthful, be direct in terms of what you're asking for, how you've arrived at your conclusions about how you built the budget. Make sure that comes through in the budget narrative and project narrative. But again, dream in systems, right? I think too many times nonprofits, just because they're in the day-to-day, are thinking about this is like a one-off project versus this is the first in what could be a tremendous partnership with this funder. Or maybe this work starts with funder A, but then in the future, funder B comes along and says, I love what you're doing, let's make it 10x bigger. Again, not every nonprofit aspires to, huge growth or anything like that, but what you all, I think, have in common is you desire to have big impact, no matter the budget you have, no matter what who you're serving, etc. So keep those things in mind. All right, before we move on to this next point, I'm gonna take a drink. If you feel comfortable, I'd love to know, is this tracking? Is this making sense? And do you find that you face, discussions with your own team or with yourself about mindset? Type yes in the chat if something here resonated with you, if you feel comfortable doing that. I always like to make sure that what I'm sharing is not just, white noise, that it's actually registering that something's making sense. So I appreciate your being here. All right, let's move on to people and machines. So this is a second bottleneck that I see. And again, I think it has a lot to do with the fact that people are just in their lane, operating in existing systems. And so, but I think there's a missed opportunity, especially today as we have more access to AI tools that are free or low cost. And you have tremendous team members as well, people or resources. Again, your organization may just have you. And so in that case, you have to be very judicious with your time, taking care of yourself, investing in yourself. So the first step I recommend is define AI 2.0 for you. So it may be that you've never used an AI tool like ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude in your life. If that's the case, maybe prompting is the first thing you want to learn about. So watch a couple of YouTube videos, ask someone in your network who uses AI a lot, learn how to prompt, right? Learn how to work with these tools to interview you, to pick up, get specific insights, to verify that what those tools are giving you is accurate with citations. You can click and look at those links and make sure that that information is accurate. I've actually talked with at least one nonprofit recently that was like, look, we're using AI so much that now we're working on AI agents, which is basically lots of different definitions around an agent, but basically creating automated systems where machines, basically you give them an assignment as you would a member of your team, and maybe they take a couple of days to do it, maybe they take a week, but they come back and bring it to you. Like, some examples outside of the nonprofit world that people often give is, I'm going to Hawaii in 2 weeks. I need you to book all my flights and hotels. Like, go do that. That's the kind of thing an agent could do, right? Or go research these, new funding proposals on, grants.gov or wherever. Bring me back the 10 most promising opportunities based on what you know about my nonprofit. Come up with an executive summary for each, and come up with an action step list for what I need to do to get these proposals submitted by the deadline. And then an agent goes and does all that, compiles it for you, etc. So again, as shocking as it is to me, again, because most companies are not even at that point, but there are, again, some larger nonprofits that are actually moving in that direction. And so I just want to make sure more nonprofits of all sizes recognize like where the market is headed so that you can plan, right? You don't need to go out and build AI agents or hire special consultants or whatever today. But I do think it's good to understand how the landscape is changing and what might be possible as more of your administrative work, more of your writing work, et cetera, can be automated in whole or in part. So experiment, right? Learn and experiment, grab a book, watch a video. If you're skeptical about AI, a great book to read is Empire of AI by Karen Hao, H-A-O, which documents, especially ChatGPT, but just in general, the development of these AI tools, and often the less attractive parts of them, right? Environmental challenges, human impact challenges. Again, I think it's really important to get different perspectives and be aware of, the good and the bad. Second, actualize the UG. So what I mean by this is there are things I suspect in your nonprofit that drive you crazy, right? It could be an aspect of your job personally. It could be routine, repetitive work that you're just having to do constantly that soaks up hours of your time. Whatever the case might be, think about what are the jobs that are driving me crazy. I hate doing them. Either I don't have someone else to delegate to, or it's just like I'm the best person I think to do this. And also, how much time do they take, right? So the ones that take the most time and drive you the most crazy, those should be the ones you should really look closely at. Are there AI tools, technologies, other people on my team who are maybe better at this or experts in this compared to me that could help me with this, right? Use machines, use people you trust, and breathe, right? Even if it's hiring someone as a contractor consultant, even if it's for a very targeted assignment. And again, I recognize money is often very tight at nonprofits, especially discretionary spending. You have to get your board's approval, maybe other hoops to jump through. So be judicious, but definitely think about, listen to your mind and body react to various tasks you have to do throughout your day, and then start breaking those tasks into chunks. If you're curious to dive deeper into the AI world, I do recommend, as a sidebar, the Artificial Intelligence Show podcast, put together by what's called the Marketing AI Institute. It is one of my number one listens every single week. It's a tremendous sort of recap of what's happening in AI by experts who've studied this field, but come to it as marketers, journalists, and communicators, so they're able to take complex principles and make them accessible. It's a great way to get the pulse on how technology is changing, how it's shaping the economy, and potential implications for nonprofits like yours. Okay, back to the material. The third point on getting through this bottleneck with people and machines is reimagining professional development. So what I mean by this is it's important throughout your month to dedicate time with yourself if you're the only person in your nonprofit who's really managing the day-to-day, or with your small or even large team, to really think about how do we start to experiment together, right? So whether it's with AI tools or new systems we're developing or innovative programming we're designing, what I really think can be powerful is giving people, if you have multiple people to work with, divvy up some ideas. Like, you take this idea we brainstormed in this meeting and mock up a proposal, right? What would the budget be? What would the programmatic elements be? What kinds of people would sponsor this or be funding this kind of work? Again, not just to be silly and waste time, but really to align with your strategic goals and objectives financially and programmatically. And again, same with AI tools, right? Maybe there's a really sticky problem or something you're really struggling with as an organization that's soaking up lots of time. It's frustrating to all of you. So go off in your own corners, get a very low cost, ChatGPT Teams subscription or whatever AI platform you prefer, and spend some time play around with it, build some tools, try some prompts, and then come back together again and compare notes, right? What worked, what didn't, and then make a document of best practices or record some videos walking yourselves through how this process works so everyone in your team can benefit. And if it's just you, again, you can keep those records, experiment with different things, one thing at a time, right? Just pick one experiment, try it for, a week, a couple weeks, and then come back and revisit and figure out, what did you learn? What can you apply? And what do you need to test next? All right, so we've been through the first two bottlenecks. Now let's move to the third. And again, this one is often very top of mind for nonprofit leaders, and that is money. So I mentioned that challenges can include having diffuse attention, right? There are so many places you could focus, so many funding opportunities, many of which aren't a great fit for you. And then there's a possibility that you may need to go out and actually cultivate relationships or take an existing funder and see if there are ways to help that they would want to grow that investment in the work that you're doing for the clients you serve. And so all of this can sort of create this swirl of excitement, nervousness, uncertainty. And so really the bottleneck here is just the wealth of possibility. Like, which option do I choose first, second, and third? How do I stay focused, especially if my runway is limited, right? So if I have 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months of funding, and then I've got to figure out what comes next, I need to pay the bills today, make sure we're continuing to have the kind of impact for clients we've promised, and make sure that we're able to have that kind of sustainable financial growth so we can have the necessary staffing, resources, funding to do those things. So the first step I'm going to recommend when it comes to breaking through that money bottleneck is to sort of take things step by step, right? And what I mean by that is, first, protect and grow existing investments, right? The business consultants will often tell you that the best, easiest money, if there is such a thing, is the money that you already have, right? So active funders, past funders that have worked with you but maybe dropped off for one reason or another, really strong relationships that maybe you have in a specific industry or the niche in which your nonprofit works. Make sure that before you start, sending out mass emailings and picking up the phone and, literally knocking on doors in some cases, those things can be great, but really make sure you're cultivating and building outstanding partnerships with each of your funders. Make sure you're engaging them as sort of co-creators or partners, right? They're not just giving you money and writing you a check, although some people just want to do that, and that's fine. But increasingly, funders want to be a partner in that journey. They're looking for insights and learnings and data. They are interested in engaging with the clients you serve. They're interested in thinking about what comes next and how to make this better, right? As I mentioned earlier, private foundations, corporations, even government agencies have specific mandates they are looking to solve and implement. And you can be a partner in that. Again, always frame this through the lens of the funder, right? What are they looking for? How can we help them grow and be successful in achieving the outcomes that they want that are also aligned with exactly what we're doing, that we can help them and be partners together in that journey? Then you can pursue that greenfield, right? And what I mean by greenfield is simply partners, funding partners in any sort of funding structure that aren't working with you today, right? Those you may have on a short list of, hey, I would love to work with X, Y, and Z organizations. I know they've funded projects like this in the past. You can do these two things in parallel, but first, I think sometimes there's this tendency to want to go after the new and different and unique. And this idea that I need to diversify quickly. Those things are all important, and guard and water sort of using a summer gardening analogy, water what you have first so it grows and flourishes. Don't let it sort of wilt in the sun while you're off here doing all these other exciting projects that may be great, but don't do immediately what you need, which is help you continue sustaining that impact, keep the lights on, etc. So that's number one. The next piece here is focus on progress over perfection. So my wife and I subscribe to a fitness app out of Australia called Team Body Project, and they're always talking with people like me who are trying to stay in shape and be healthy and be there for our kids and so forth. Progress over perfection is sort of their motto, and I really like that. I think it's really powerful to recognize that as a nonprofit, your goal is not to do everything perfectly, right? Your job is to be authentic, to be human, to leverage the tools available to you and the human capital available to you to do the most good, right? It doesn't mean burning yourself out. It doesn't mean trying to have it all right away or burning the midnight oil. Sometimes you may have to do that, right? Your nonprofit may have no choice. But in general, my experience working with nonprofits over the years is that tiny steps beat no steps, right? So the tendency when you have all of this information, all of these possible funders, your runway is shrinking financially, the tendency is just to like go, 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 or to just freeze and be like, I don't even know what to do. I think we're stuck, we're trapped. I don't want that for you. I know you don't want that. And so again, tiny steps beat no steps. Another risk is circular steps, right? We're doing the same things, we're doing the same habits, hoping for different results. And of course, the worst case scenario, backward steps, right? Not only are we not getting new funding, but our current funders aren't happy because we're not fulfilling on the things we told them we would. So those are the risks you have to guard against. But I think, again, making tiny steps, moving in that direction of more funding sustainability can be really, really helpful. And then finally, look beyond the horizon. Anticipate, how that funding is going to flow to your nonprofit, and make sure you're thinking ahead, right? So if you have a time horizon of 6 months and then you don't have another big award coming in after that you know of, now is the time to be investing in outreach, in submitting proposals, in building relationships with funding partners, so that you're not caught off guard and having to sort of bandage things together as that funding dials down, right? You're able to sort of even out the flow of funding to your organization. That is a perennial challenge to any organization, nonprofit or for-profit. But again, the more you can look beyond the horizon and anticipate, the better off you're going to be long term. All right. That's a lot of material, I know. But I appreciate your bearing with me. I hope that was helpful. So here's a quick summary, right? The challenges on the left, mindset being the first row, the second one being humans and machines. How do we make those work together more harmoniously? How do we leverage our human capital and the machines, the AI, the tools at our disposal? And then finally, money, right? How do we make sure we are biasing toward action versus only research? How do we get through some of these tricky predicaments, funding horizons, etc., and extend that runway for more sustainability overall? All right. So as it relates to your homework, I want to ask you to take a minute and jot down some notes around as you're thinking through these bottlenecks, right? We've talked about mindset. We've talked about human and machine, working together. We've talked about money. Which of those three bottlenecks are you going to focus on breaking through first? This month I'm recording in July, but if you're watching this in August or years down the road, think about this current month, the next 30 days. What are you going to prioritize with those three bottlenecks? That's number one. All right, have you thought about it? You've identified what's going to be your focus for the next 30 days of those bottlenecks? All right, once you've done that, I want you to think about what's the first step you're going to take, 15 minutes or less, to make meaningful progress in breaking through that bottleneck, right? Maybe it's a conversation. Maybe it's a journaling session. You just need some time to write some things down, get them out of your head, organize them later. Maybe it is, pardon me, looking at your list of existing funders and saying, how are we going to do one outreach to each of these this week to let them know we're thinking about them, to share an insight from a program they're funding, to check in and see if there's anything we can do to be helpful to them. Think through those things and then write that down and use that as your guide over the next 30 days. Okay, I love this quote from Frank Sonnenberg on Goodreads. Words express what's on your mind, but your actions say what's in your heart. And so my admonition to you is, this is the time to take action, right? If you are on this recording, you're watching this video, I suspect you probably are facing some kind of a bottleneck, right? The topic drew you in for some reason. And so rather than just sort of sitting on it, dwelling with it, worrying about it, now is the time to take action, right? To make progress. And so definitely get the words right? Get the plan right, and then take action, because that ultimately demonstrates where your heart and mind are at relative to delivering more and greater impact for your clients. All right. I hope this has been helpful to you today. This is the point where I ask you for some feedback. So if you're watching this live or on the video, go ahead and scan this QR code or go to this URL and enter the code Bottlenecks. Would love some feedback on your reactions and thoughts on today's session. Would be very curious to hear what was helpful, what you might like to know more about in the future. And then once you do that and submit your survey, then you will automatically get a copy of that cheat sheet that I mentioned to you. All right. So that is the conclusion of today's session. I am so grateful that you took the time out of your busy schedule to join me. I hope it was helpful to learn a little bit more about where we see the landscape within nonprofit leadership. What are some of those key operating bottlenecks? And what are some strategies for starting to break through those? Again, this is not an impossible task. Yes, it can feel overwhelming. There's no question about that. And it's also a really great opportunity to revisit your mindset, take care of yourself, take care of your colleagues and your partners and your clients. Then think about, how are we working best with technology, tools, AI, etc., and leveraging our human capital first, centering everything around humans, recognizing our worth, our value. We are an investment. The work we're doing is an investment. And then finally, thinking about money, right? How to apply those things to your fundraising strategy, to being good stewards of the resources you have, and to having more fun in your nonprofit, frankly. I think funders like when nonprofits and the partners they fund are happy, excited, seeing value, seeing impact, and great thought partners in making the world a better place. So thank you very much. I will see you next month. When I'm recording this, that'll be August 2025 for our next session. Until then, I'm Nate Birt with Silver Maple Strategies. Would love for you to visit us anytime at www.silvermaplestrategies.com. If you're watching this on YouTube, hit subscribe. If you're listening to the podcast, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts or the favorite podcatcher of your choice. And until then, take good care, and I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye, everybody.